The first thing you're going to do when you are doing this, the eyes in lights and shadows, is just to create a grid right below the eyes. And we're just going to tone the paper. We just put a little bit of charcoal on there, and then we rubbed it with our tissue to make it a nice smooth surface. This one might be a little bit dark, but it's fine. And then we created a grid going all the way across. So we've got the same grid for the eyes up above and the grid in the blank space below. That's going to be able to help us when we're finding our negative space and being able to put everything in proportion with the eyes when we draw them. So what you're looking for is negative spaces. And so what we're going to look for here right at the beginning, you can see the eyebrow there, and you can look at the shape. And I'm just on the one, I'm just outlining the shape of the eyebrow. And then I'm looking for that negative space that's occurring on the side there where there's that shadow on the side of the face. Then I'm going to go in and I'm going to use my grid as my guide. And I'm just going to gently draw that negative space on the side with my pencil in there so that I get the edge where I'll be placing some more shadow on the side of the face. So you can see I'm just going in and I'm just drawing some outlines of the spaces that are going to be shadowed when I'm done. So I've got a few areas that are outlined that I'll shadow at a later time. Now as I'm going in, I'm looking for negative spaces of lights and shadows. And up on top here, I'm just highlighting, or sorry, I'm just outlining an area that's shaded up here. I'm just finding a negative space up in there that's shadowed just above the eye and below the eyebrow. And once I've outlined that up above, then I can see it a lot more clearly. And I'm just going to transfer that same shape down on my toned area on down below. Once I get all these negative space areas outlined in here, then I'm going to go in and I'm going to start erasing where I want the highlights to be, and I'm going to be adding some more shadow where I want the shadows to be. But right now I'm just finding those different shapes in that drawing where there's lighter and darker areas, and I'm just transferring those shapes down below onto the toned ground below where I'll be drawing the eyes below. So there's this triangle space in there that I've transferred. I've drawn the shading of the eyebrow in there, and then I'm going to be looking for more and more negative spaces as I go. So I'm just zooming in here so you can see what I'm doing. Just a light outline of the areas where you can see shadow on the eye, shadow with the eyebrow, and those are being transferred down in there. So hopefully you can see that a little bit more clearly as I've zoomed in here to see that. And then once we go about that, then we're going to be finding those negative spaces in the eyes as well, on the whites of the eyes, where's the negative spaces, and we'll be transferring those shapes. So I'm not really looking at the eye and saying, okay, how do I draw an eye? I'm looking at the shapes that occur, and I'm transferring the different shapes from the highlights and shadows onto the drawing. So as I move forward and I look into the whites of the eye, I'm going to be finding more negative space there. So we already drew that one, and I can also compare here as I lay the pencil down. Okay, do I have this going far enough out using my grid lines, using my pencil to go to see how far away things are on the paper? Now over here, there's a little area of negative space here that will be highlighted, and so I just want to make sure I position that properly, and I'm going to transfer that shape down below, and you'll see that I do that for the whole eye. I'm just looking for shapes, and I'm transferring different shapes that I'm noticing and seeing on the actual picture, and I'm transferring those shapes down onto the drawing below. So once the shapes are in there, then we'll start highlighting and shading, and you'll really see the drawing start coming to life. But at first, it's all about recognizing shapes in the highlights and the shadows. Okay, now that you have the shapes drawn in there from those negative spaces where you were looking for the lights and shadows, now you can go in and you can shade those areas that are much darker on your drawing. And so you'll start adding shadows with your pencil or your charcoal, and And you can smudge that with your finger so you don't have a sharp line. We're not really looking for sharp lines. We're still just looking for lights and shadows in here. Once you've started adding shadows, you can also go in with your eraser as well, and then you can start erasing the toned ground to be getting some highlights in here. So this first part is just adding the shadows with your charcoal, and you can go back as you go and make some darker. If they're a little bit light, you can always go back in with your eraser and make them lighter as well. In this one, you can see that the eyebrows should be a little bit darker than the shadow that triangle shadow that was drawn just under the eyebrow but above the eye. And so just go in and start adding your shadows. Once you've got some basic shadows in, pull out your eraser and then you can start erasing for the highlights, and then you'll really start to see things come alive.